Okay, hey everyone, Dai-Shihan Miller here from Weird Concepts, and we are here with this week's episode of KUDEN. We're going to continue on with a new series that I started. And again, I'm not doing these every week, but what I thought would be really cool is to interview my students. So instead of going the other way, right? Um, Interview my students and see how things are working for them and whatnot. And so if you were on for, I think it was episode maybe 223, 222, something like that, where I had Sensei Davis on, Lee Davis. You kind of get the gist of things, right? So it's just an open conversation. We'll be just discussing some of the topics, and what I'm hoping for is that along the way, folks will see themselves in some of these students. And again, I'm choosing my high engaging students, obviously, right? And while I have a lot of them, I want to make sure that we're on track with folks that are actually handling a lot of the life situations that get in the way for most. And I'm hoping that some folks see into it. All right. So anyway, I have one of my guys in the wings. He's waiting, and we'll pull him out. I think call him out. What I don't know. Anyway, we'll do something with him once we get started. So I'll see you when I get back. Question is this: how are self-defense and success-minded people like us, concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world? How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to KUDEN Radio, real training for real people in a real world. And that is still my story, and I'm still sticking with it, and it's been working so far. So either it's true or you guys keep showing up for the same BS. Anyway, so speaking of BS and thinking, what you think you become, what you feel. What does it say? What you feel, you what? Oh, you attract. Oh yeah. Think I could read. Anyway, all right. So welcome to episode, what is this, 225, something like that, of KUDEN. And we're continuing on with the next interview in a series. For those of you who follow on a regular basis, you know that 2 or 3 episodes ago, I kicked off, yes, pun intended, I kicked off a new series where I'm interviewing some of my high my highly engaged students. Okay. And so and that goes for folks that are not just at the academy, but also in my long distance program, parts of my inner circle group, but collectively, right, they're that way. And so we're going to do these intermittently as we go along, because I don't want it to just become an interview podcast. I mean, this is the format itself is supposed to fill an important role uh, in the training from teacher to students. Right. Again, we have 3 ways that a teacher conveys the knowledge in these old arts. Right. There's Taiden, Kuden, and Shinden. Okay. So Taiden, everybody gets all jazzed about Taiden, right? That's me using my body to demonstrate techniques on you or on somebody else, so that you can learn how to do things with your body. Tai, body, den, transmission, right? And then there's Kuden, which is more knowledge and insight and perspective and things like that. That in the context of a modern martial arts class, our classes typically are an hour at the academy. My Shinobi Kai black belts, those folks, right, their classes run about an hour and a half. But in all honesty, there isn't enough time, right, to do everything that could be done. I mean, when I first started teaching, my classes were 2.5, 3 hours long, right? But I realized that, and I know there's lots of folks that, yeah, us too, right? But I realized that was one of the primary reasons why our group didn't grow, because A lot of folks, right? They're working adults, and depending on when the classes are, they've got families and other responsibilities. And while we would like to train all the time, which is why we do these weekend intensives, it's just not feasible, right? I found that when I shifted that, then everything changed, right? And so, anyway, but so Kuden, what this is named after, is really in the realm of what we would call seishin, right? Personal development, knowledge, understanding, those kind of things. But then there's this shinden, right? Shinden. Shin is heart. Okay? Shin is in like kokoro, or like your core, essential nature, that kind of thing. And so a lot of that, well, some of it can be conveyed verbally and kind of a knowledge thing, right? Warriors feel this way. Warriors are motivated by those kind of things. What I've experienced in my training, regardless of the teacher in this art that that I was training with, all the way up and including Hatsumi Sensei. As a matter of fact, he's the biggest example of this. Uh, I learned more by watching and getting a sense of and feeling, not just in the teacher to student kind of thing, but just in the way the teacher does things on a regular basis, right? And so there's this, it's unspoken, right? They don't have to touch you, although every once in a while, you get one of those little slaps up the backside of your head because you weren't paying attention, right, or whatever. But there's a sense that kind of gets conveyed. In our Mikyo classes, we often talk about how rebirth and reincarnation are two completely different things. And so in Mikyo, people will hear this thing about rebirth and then think, oh, that's like, after you die, you can end up being reborn as a cow or something like that. And that's not the same. Okay. Rebirth is like the essential nature of something being passed from point A to point B, but nothing changes. It's like taking a candle that's unlit, and you're going to take it to the flame of another candle that's burning to light the wick of that new candle, right? And then you come away with it. Okay. The idea of reincarnation is the candle, or often when we talk about reincarnation, the candle on the primary candle that you're lighting the new one off of is just about to go out, and then you bring the other one over, and a lot of people will think, well, the flame passed from one wick to another, but that's not what happened. Okay. Something passed, but what we tend to talk about is this essential nature, right? This connection. There's this fireness. There's this essence that passes, and without sounding spiritual and woo. But this is what happens from teacher to student, right? Unless the student has only signed up for the yellow belt course and is only looking to learn cool moves, and the teacher runs a club where, and I use that word very, 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 very particularly, right? Club, right? Where they're teaching moves. They're really heavily leaning into the Taiden stuff. And then, uh, what I find in most of those groups is that like attracts like. And so that's been my experience. Anyway, this Kuden approach, the podcast, for me, is, I would say, 60% of the Kuden out of those three dens, right? The knowledge and those insights and things like that, and about 40% Shinden. I'm not going to split hairs, but I do want a certain feel to come across. I do want a certain something, right, to come across, because that's a huge part of the teacher-student relationship. Otherwise, we would just have a transactional relationship, right? You pay me for a certain number of techniques, and I teach those. Well, how is that any different than just you going to YouTube and watching any specific number of techniques, right? I mean, why would you pay somebody to? And this is the thought that a lot of people have. And I would say that most of those people, unless they get a little reframe or a different perspective, they're not going to see the difference, right? Because why would I pay a teacher when I can just go to YouTube? Okay? Well, there's lots of things. Okay, one of those is accountability. Okay, try to have one of those instructors on there who has a pre-recorded lesson. Hold you accountable for not practicing, not working on the things you said you were going to work on or whatever. Now, if you're avoiding accountability, by all means, YouTube's the place to be. Okay? You can learn all kinds of things. Okay? And there's not even a disclaimer that says this may or may not be true. So anyway, all right. So my right-hand man, James Alexander, Sensei Alexander, is he'll be on as soon as he resolves an internet connectivity problem. I don't know where he is and where he's setting up. I just know that just as we were about to go live, I got this message from him. So hopefully he gets that all resolved and he'll jump on. But again, this is a continuation. So this is the next in the series of what I'm calling the student's perspective, or a Ninjutsu student's perspective. And so instead of, again, for those of you who missed the first round, instead of me bringing in, I don't know, I'm going to use a colloquialism, right? Instead of me bringing in some high muckety muck in Ninjutsu, right? So, and then me interviewing them, which people, there are lots of numbers, but again, what I've experienced is that people tend to get starstruck, and then they're not really hearing the lessons that kotsu, that essential nature, isn't coming across because they signed up for Joe Cool Master Bibbidi Bob. I don't know, right? But anyway, so what I wanted to do was flip this, and so I'm interviewing students. Okay, so I've got one in the wings. I'm sure he's getting bored because he's hyper like I am. I'm sure we're both undiagnosed EDD, unless he's already diagnosed me. So anyway, and I don't have a bio for him. I don't have a bio for any of these guys because my first question when we start working these things is, tell us about yourself. So, but what I will tell you is that currently he is my second oldest training student. I know it disappoints him greatly. But the other guy started in 1990 at 45. So anyway, so Fred's been with me for quite a while, but we'll talk about that as we go. And I'm just hoping that Fred dispels a whole bunch of bullshit excuses that people have for not doing things. Yeah, that's me laughing. Anyway, so let me do this. Without further ado, I'm going to bring my guy Fred Strickland on. And I know this is going to come up. Oh, now he's in the you're in the penalty box, Fred. All right. So, Mr. Dr. Retired Musician Grand Poobah, Fred Strickland. How are you, sir?
Excellent. Good evening.
You know what? Your camera makes your picture look like you're a 70s portrait. So,
well, how appropriate is that?
not that the pictures in the 70s, it was taken in the 1970s. You know what I mean? The more clear and crisp the resolution of our stuff gets here. That's part and parcel to why I'm redoing or relaunching all the modules for our online training program, because as things keep upgrading, the images keep downgrading from the old stuff. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and bring up my notes here. Not that anybody's going to be able to see them but me, and that's perfect. Where Fred, I brought this up before we got started. What did you do with them? Why am I blaming Fred? All right, let me find them again. I need to find my notes. That's the wrong switch. Oh my goodness gracious. There we go. I don't know how I ended up losing them. Anyway, all right. So, ta-da! This is Fred. The only thing I'm going to say is that Fred is a member of our Shinobi Kai program at the Academy. And Fred, I think you jumped in that fairly early in your career with us. But let's start. I don't know, make it more formal, right? So tell everybody a little bit about yourself. Yes, well, you don't have to tell them your age, but you can hint, right? Age, what you do, hobbies, side gigs. This is going to take up a while, guys, because he's as busy as I am, just in different areas. Okay?
Well, in regard to age, I like the T-shirt that said it was more fun being 20 in the 70s than 70 in the 20s. So
yeah, wasn't that Joe Walsh?
could well be.
I think he did that at not a seminar, at a concert, because he's now in his 70s, I think. Yeah. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I had my 76th birthday last week, so there's no mystery about that. Let's see. I'm back home. I was born here in central Pennsylvania, went to high school in Selinsgrove, was elsewhere for 25 years, and then came back and had a practice around here for 25 years or so doing psychiatry, which I retired from, a little over 2.5 years or something like that ago.
Which is something you use in class quite often. Every time that topic comes up, first thing you say is, what? I'm retired. I'm not paying attention.
Right. I used to know all that stuff, but this is now, that was then. But anyway, when I retired, I was realizing, well, I was going to retire a couple of years earlier, and with the pandemic, I just couldn't leave the situation. I couldn't leave the folks hanging. So I did telemedicine, which I never thought I would do in my career, but during the pandemic, that's what one did. And it put me in a weird space because I was ready to be gone. It wasn't quite the same kind of contact, and it just sort of grayed out, and I just sort of drifted in. I was almost kind of feeling like I was gradually coasting downhill toward oblivion. And then when I retired, I just had a realization that wasn't the last chapter, it was the next chapter. And so
there you go.
I started thinking about, okay, well, what do I want to do? I've been a musician, played in bands since the Louis days in the 1960s, playing guitar and bass, singing. But I always wanted to play keyboard, bought one 10 years ago, never spent any time on it. And so that was my one project to take up. And I had my first paying gig on the keyboard like back in July. And yesterday was at this big music thing, got to play and sing some, and also play some bass for some of the really good musicians there. Not that I'm that on the keys yet, but we'll see. It's a long road. But the other thing I got to thinking about, and Sensei probably remembers this because I decided to get back into martial arts. I'd done some like 30 years ago, and just kind of thought it would. But what the thought was, at my age, the time may come when I need a cane, and a cane might mark me as a vulnerable person. And it would be very nice to be able to use that cane to provide education to folks who make that mistake in their thinking.
Provide education to someone who's made a poor life decision. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So when I started calling around local schools, one of my questions was, I'm interested in stick and staff training. Do you offer that? And the answer was yes, but there's a lot of other things that you probably need to build in as a foundation before that will really benefit you. And that seemed reasonable. So I signed up for, I guess it was like 3 half-hour classes plus an introductory session. And in that introductory session, I to this day don't know whether it was something that I thought and observed, or whether it was the echo of my martial arts experience 30 years ago, getting me a little bit of an insight, or whether it was something beyond all of that. But just some of the ways that Sensei was moving, it was like, man, I need me some of that. That's what I said to myself. So I signed up right away.
That was akin to Taekwondo, right?
What's that?
That was akin to Taekwondo, right?
It was a Kung Fu, but I'm not sure how different that is from the Taekwondo that some of the other students, the notion of punching and chambering was very much part of our training back then,
Sure.
So anyway, so I basically just at that point said, well, I'll sign up for the whole 3-year thing. And the deal there, of course, was it was building in some extra incentive to myself, because I'm jolly well not going to leave before I get the lessons I paid for. So here I am, 2.5 years in now.
Yeah, I remember our first conversation where we were exploring the intro program, and then the next step, and in all honesty, you were, from my recollection, you were kind of hesitant about committing too long term because, I think what you said was, at my age, I don't know how much longer I'll be here. And
does any of us, though?
No, absolutely not. Right. Absolutely not. And so, I mean, Yeah, I joke in class about, wouldn't it have been convenient if after you were born, right, the owner's manual for your body and your mind came out, and then, I don't think mom would have appreciated the shapes or anything, um, but also like a warranty didn't come out either, right? And so,
Well, thanks goodness there was no expiration date either. So.
That's right. That's right. Um, so, and we'll get to kind of some of the transformations that you notice, because I love it when students go from one point to another, and they'll tell me, I never thought I'd be doing this again. I never thought, not just martial arts, right? But because of age or because of physical fitness. I get lots of comments online about, being old or fat or whatever, which is really funny because every once in a while it happens at the academy. And I always hear it third person or secondhand or something like that, where a student will say that somebody stopped in and said they want to talk to the master instructor, and they'll point, and the person will make some kind of comment, that guy, whatever. And they'll say, yeah, just go grab him. And nobody's done it yet, but I'm not sure I like that the students are feeding me to the wolves. But Hatsumi Sensei's, said for a long, long time about how training tends to slow the aging process and makes you feel younger, or gives you some abilities back that you thought were gone, right? But you tend to be somebody that is, from my perspective anyway, that's always trying something new. Like I remember when you told me that you were starting the keyboard, right? Because you've been playing other instruments and whatnot. So that was was something I've always wanted to do. Ta-da! There it is. Right. Same thing with the getting back in martial arts, and so yeah, it's a cool thing. Let me just, you know what? Why don't I think that's part of the questions anyway. The Tell the folks a little bit about some of the other, I call them side gigs, but I don't know that you have any business side gigs or whatever, but you certainly have your hands on a whole lot of freaking pies. So why don't you just kind of let folks in on some of the other things that takes Fred's time that, in my opinion, is far more than the average person has, who uses the "I have no time" reasoning for either they're in training, and they're not getting in extra practice, right? They come to class and then they, whatever, or they stay in the "I always wanted to do that," um, or "I really want to do that" kind of phase. And I know as a former psychiatrist, you probably never heard those kind of things from people before, and how they kind of got held back. But why don't you kind of give folks a little peek into the other things other than class that cause you to sit around in a rocking chair all day long. Of course,
Well, when I was just graduating from college, I of course gave some thought to, well, what kind of a career do I want to have? What do I want to do? And there were three things that seemed appealing to me: music, medicine, and meditation. But I felt I didn't have the talent to succeed in music, and I didn't have the courage to succeed in meditation. So that's why I ended up going into medicine. But those have both remained interest the whole way. You know, the music, as I mentioned, I was in a band in high school doing Louie Louie and that kind of thing, and then played in country bands to make money to go to medical school. And then life got busy, and I just didn't do much in terms of playing music other than just guitar and singing at home. Um, but once I moved back home here, I got involved in something called the Local Music Collective. I have not. This was already in existence 8 years. I had nothing to do with choosing such a clunky name, but it was basically a group of folks who would get together once a month in one of the members' houses and play music. And when I came on board, the organization was in dire straits. It had been very successful for a while, putting a pot of money together, bringing musicians in from out of town for concerts, Then a blizzard wiped out that pot of money, and there were personality conflicts. So the thing was, we had 120 members, of which something like 20 were paid up, because they were just asking people to notice on the envelope that their membership was due for renewal and send a check in. Well, you can imagine how often that happened. So over the next couple of years, I got involved in resuming the jams, people going and playing each other's houses, because that's part of what builds community. And I restructured the membership to where you could pay for a 3-year membership all at once, so you didn't have to mess with it until 3 years down the road. And we reminded people, quarterly newsletter, and as they got close to reminding, their cover would be red, and it would say red alert across the top when they looked on the inside cover, where I always had a little note just discussing what was going on and saying, oh, by the way, you need to. And the membership, that really succeeded. The membership got up as high as like 130 paid members.
Wow.
Trouble is, the demographics of it is, and there's many organizations have the same problem around this area anyway. They were really excellent for my demographic, but there's not as many of us left, and those are around aren't always as active, or they've moved away and retired, or they've downsized and don't have room to host it. So the organization has really kind of started to how to say it, the numbers have gone down.
Sure.
And it got to the point where there was just 3 of us running it. One of them, his wife died suddenly, so that was devastating for him. Another, who's retired, had a grandson born in Utah with serious medical issues, so he's out in Utah quite a bit, although the kid is doing a lot better now. And I've got serious health issues of people in my family too that live 700 miles away. So
sure.
That's another thing that's going on that takes time and thought. So I've been really trying, really dating back 10 or 15 years. I was like, man, if something happened to me, this organization would be in trouble, because nobody else knows how the database is kept and how the membership addresses are printed and the email strings are generated and all that stuff. So I basically formed a committee, which became, kind of the governing body, and that's done well. But there are only 3 of us left on the committee, like I said. So we've been really trying to get other folks in. And there's a book called, oh gosh, what is it? It's by two members of the Army War College about leadership, and it's been fascinating. There's PCN here in Pennsylvania has a program where they interview authors of books, and they discuss the thinking and all the stuff that went in the book. It's fascinating stuff. And I realized that both in this collective, and I imagine Sensei Miller would notice this in his organization as well, a lot of the leadership issues they mention are absolutely have played out in the 30 years I've been helping to run this thing. Anyway, I decided at the beginning of this year to tell the organization I needed to step back at the end of this year to deal with family issues up and whatnot.
Sure.
And that someone else would need to step up and take over the duties. Well, no one has. A couple of people that joined the committee and failed to observe the rule that when you say what something needs to be done, your next sentence should be, and I'd like to lead this, and if you will help me, let's get it done. But if they're saying you should do this, well, good luck. That doesn't happen. And
that's right.
And so those new members.
Or they use the term "we," right? We should do this.
Yes.
But they're not going to help.
Yeah. No, and that doesn't fly.
They don't mean me included. They mean a bunch of people in the collective should do it. But
yeah. But anyway, back a couple of weeks ago, we had our 40th anniversary jam, and it was like an extravaganza. We had 10 bands. We started at noon, ran through till almost midnight. I did the sound for it, did the MC, had a couple turns on stage myself, took care of the trash, provided the local music collective booth, brought the cake. It was a lot of work, a lot of effort. It's why I haven't been around the dojo much last few weeks. Because prior,
you went back and forth to Georgia too, taking care of family.
I did that as well.
Absolutely.
But that basically was either the capstone of this organization, and it was a very worthy way to go out. But we had 3 people express interest, and we already had 1, so that's 4. That might be enough. It may not be the last chapter. And the forecast that day, it rained heavily up until about 10 that morning. The forecast was for showers on and off all day and severe weather in the afternoon. And we did not get a drop. And the message I took from that is, not all clouds rain and not all grim forecasts come true. So maybe for the collective, there are better days ahead yet. We'll see. I don't know yet, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, I've heard plenty of times, they're calling for this. What are you going to do? Well, I'm going to do my best at sending out my good ninja juju magic that I learned. But we'll see what happens when the moment comes, because I get it. It's a forecast, but I don't have one of those jobs like a doctor or a lawyer or a weather forecaster or whatever, where you do the best you can at predicting things. But I think the weather forecaster is way out there.
Yeah, there's no industry suing them when they're wrong, like
That's
there is
right,
for
like
doctors.
horoscopes and things like So anyway, let me just check in with a couple of folks that are on. I'm on. James, like I said, normally runs this thing over here. I'm hoping he makes it over. So I see that Dave Fletcher is on. Dave says, "Where's the shag carpet on the walls?" That must have been back to the '70s comment. Fantastic. All right. I used to tell
My
people
posters are in another room, my friend.
there you go. Jared says, "Good evening." Let's see. Mary Barnett, looking forward to tonight's. Okay, cool. That's all I see at the moment. Hopefully, other folks will jump on. I see the numbers that are up. Most of our folks catch us on replay. So there was something that you mentioned that I want to speak to just quickly here, and this is one of the reasons why I actually start looking for instructor candidates long before people get to black belt, right? One, I have a complete instructor training program. So, because there's this belief in the martial arts, and it's one of the only endeavors where there's this spoken or unspoken belief that once you earn a black belt, then you're automatically qualified to teach. And you and I both know you could be an expert in whatever area, whatever realm, industry, whatever, and you could be a lousy teacher. I mean, just uh, so it's a whole different skill set. I think when I sent you an email today, I was working on certain things. We were talking about a picture and cleaning up pictures and all that, and I said, and yet another skill set that I never thought would be a part of teaching. When I set out to actually start doing this, but so there's such an issue with attrition, right? For every for every 100 students that start, and there's actually a trackable thing, and this is not just in Ninjutsu. I actually think that we have a better percentage of retention than the national average, but across the board for martial arts, self-defense, that kind of thing, and these are all based on surveys that most. I'm just going to pick adults. Most adults drop off at about the 100-day mark, right after enrollment, okay, in any given program. So, and again, it's average, right? But the first major drop-off point. So that's why I put in the intro programs and the transitional kind of things that I have, instead of just tossing somebody into the full program and then having a mindset that, oh, good, another person that I can help get to black belt. First thing I need to do is help this person get some habits or develop some habits that this becomes something worth doing. Do you know what I mean? But like the first one is 100 days. The second one after that, if I can keep them past 100 days, the next major drop off for martial arts students is 4 to 11 months. Okay? I'm sure there's a lot of people that might be listening to this that who have been trying to get back into training can find themselves in one of those two pockets, right? And now it's been 10 years, 35 years, whatever, and they're still, I don't know how to get back in. Well, my problem, my and again, it's the way I tend to look at things. I think there's a problem with saying getting back to something, because people have a recollection about the training and how they did it and how they liked it and all that, but they were also younger, and they were also, there was more time available in life and all that, right? So I'm not a big fan of getting back to anything, right? How about if we just get started? How about if we just make that thing. But what you mentioned was the number in the group that help and whatnot. And there's a lot. There's a lot that keeps getting traced back to game theory these days, and there are these numbers. But one of the things they found, and actually, Planet Fitness, the gyms,
Yeah.
their business model, okay, is based on this number, and they have never maxed out capacity in any given facility across the nation. Okay. And that is that only 5% of their membership enrolled and paying monthly tuition actually steps foot into the gym. And if they do, it's usually on the front end because the intention was high, and then they drift off. But what they have done is created a situation where the tuition or the membership fees are so low, right? It's $10 a month for bare bones basic stuff, and it's $20 a month if you get the massage table and whatever the amenities are, right? But they have, it's like 100 or more to 1 for every person, right? Even if everybody in the area that has a Planet Fitness membership, right, they all decide to go to the gym at the same time, there's no way in hell, right, that they would fit in the facility, let alone in the parking lot. I mean, they have hundreds, if not thousands, for every one that actually shows up. And so I had to start considering this, right, in our instructor training program. And I think it's I don't know. I'd like to think it's a leadership thing, but and it's only because at one point in my career, a mentor told me that anything that I'm doing that's organization based, whether it's the martial arts school and I think at that point in time it was the martial arts school, but it could be family, it could be whatever, that the way it operated, the way it functioned, the way it did anything was a reflection of the leader and their particular vision or lack thereof. And so made me look at things a little bit differently. But I tried, you guys are in Shinobi Kai, and at a certain point, you're not even black belts yet, right? I think in Mod 4, there's requirements in the curriculum, right, that you help with classes, or you learn to learn how the flow of a class works, so that if for whatever reason, I mean, the instructor could be ill and out that day and you need to pinch hit, but at the same time, there could be an emergency. The teacher got everything started and everything's running just fine, and then there's a phone call, right? And they've got to cut out quickly, or there's another type of an emergency. There could be an injury. There could be anything that happens, and the teacher needs to, move in and take care of that. And somebody needs to be able to step in. And that's very, very different from a club where we're going to meet at my house and train in the garage or the backyard for an hour and a half or whatever it is. And then if something goes amiss, then, the students will just have to understand. I think that's what I thought. Yeah. The cat decided it needed attention. Right. So, yes. But in the martial arts world, people tend to get used to the idea that, well, no class tonight, right? Teacher's busy, got something else going on or whatever. But I can't operate an academy that, is professional. And when somebody signs up, there's a 99.5% likelihood that if they stick it out, they're going to earn at least their shodan, right? But I get lots of students that come in from all kinds of different arts in the past, including our own, where they were working through things just fine, and then their teacher got a divorce, or their teacher, took a job or got in a promotion or whatever in the particular company they were in. Next thing you know, the whole group is disbanded because, this singular person moved off somewhere else. So anyway, let me just see if anybody else popped in here. Let's see. Dave says Planet Fitness, the best for shower availability while traveling. Fair enough.
Can I speak to that for a second?
Sure.
25 years ago, I spent 6 months living in my van, traveling all out west, and finding a place for a shower was a big issue. I may do that again in a year or two. Who knows? And that's a tip I hadn't thought of. I thank you very much for that. Showers aren't that cheap to come by on the road. $10 a
Yeah,
month.
and I think you
There you
can,
go.
like, even if you had to fill out a piece of paper or whatever, right? You're signing up for a freebie trial day or something like that before they even talk to you about membership. So can't find a truck stop. I'm sure you can find a Planet Fitness. Dave. Anyway, Samuel Blair's on. Hey, Samuel, how are you? Samuel's retired from the Texas public safety group. I think that's, you'll have to correct me, Samuel, but I think it's the equivalent or close to our, what we would call our state police. Although the Texas Rangers, or I guess technically they're state police, but let's see. I don't see anything else. I'll check on James here in a minute. All right, let me bring up the other the notes again here. So I don't have your card. I don't have any of that stuff in front of me. I didn't take notes. I just got back late yesterday, early evening. My wife and I took my daughter and my grandson to the beach for the first time, and he got his first taste of the ocean, literally. But he had a great time. He's in a long line of ocean people, so it was all good. But when did you actually get started in? Well, actually, let's back up. So you said like 30 some years ago you were in a martial art, and
Yes.
so was that like while you were in college?
No, that
What
was
did you
my
do?
first. That was my first job out of residency. It was in Meadville, Pennsylvania. It was just a local kung fu place. Um, yeah, it was interesting. I'd had no experience in martial arts before that, but it was just like 2 classes a week, an hour each. I didn't practice a whole lot in between because I was also that just starting out my career as a psychiatrist there at the hospital.
Sure.
Um,
Did you get any? You earn any rank or anything like that?
yeah, well, basically the belts started off white, then green, then purple, and but they had a philosophy which I kind of liked in a way, saying you can always wear the white belt because who isn't a beginner in some way, you know?
Sure.
So, if you earned a green belt but chose to wear a white belt instead, no eyebrows raised, that's fine. Um, and so and it was some months there wasn't as many steps as in WCI. So basically, at one point I got tested for my green belt, didn't realize that I knew I didn't feel good. Turned out the next day I found out I had pneumonia. I did as you might expect on that test, but they passed me anyway. But
Okay.
I didn't really feel like I'd earned it, so I wore the white belt for another couple months, and finally I put the green belt on. 2 weeks later, the head of the school, who I only ever saw like twice in that whole time in the couple of years I was there, because he just wasn't around much, came in, said, "We're entering a tournament. We need some purple belts." Handed me a purple belt, and at that point, I became a little disillusioned with the way they assigned rank.
Wow. Alrighty then.
But I had a
Yeah.
training partner who was a lifelong friend. He passed away 3 or 4 years ago. I would go out to see him in the last couple of months of actually the last couple of years of his. And he called me up one time and said, "I got good news and bad news." He said, "The good news, no," he said, "the bad news is I have liver cancer." Um, that's the good news, because the bad news is I also have bone cancer, but the liver cancer will kill me before the cancer explodes my bones. Is that kind of humor. He would have been so at home in our school,
The
Sensei.
dark
I've
humor.
often thought, in fact, I've often wished he was riding on my shoulder, because he would have just loved the approach we had.
If it's
Kindred
not
spirit
dark
for
humor,
sure.
our adult classes go too adult sometimes. But anyway, not that we're training naked. All right, come on, guys. Anyway, so you mentioned, there's weren't as many steps or whatever. There's actually a spin on that as well. Well, not really a spin, but there's a, what's a good word? I guess it's the contrary side. It's not a complimentary side, where there's this belief that the way they're doing it in Japan is not only the right way, it's the only right way. And what is that? What is that bias? Is it anchoring bias, where the way someone first encounters something is their baseline, unless they run some processes and whatnot, that they tend to measure everything else based on that thing being the right way, the only right way, that kind of thing, right? So, as people get involved with our art, as things have transitioned, changed along the way, um, a lot of this happens. But there was a point way back, I think it was mid 80s, it might have been a little bit earlier. I'm sure if I went and looked at all of my Ninja Realm and Musubi newsletters that came out of Stephen Hayes's group way early in the day, I can find it, because we had always had this curriculum that was really kind of based around the way most martial arts are set up, okay, as far as substance and how long you should be in it before somebody else takes you seriously, right? And so, but there's a curriculum, and I think it's still being used now. Hopefully, with the new Soke, because I know some of these guys, and they're more particular, and so I foresee more stringent requirements coming out that are more like our requiring people to actually demonstrate skill proficiency before they get rank, as opposed to here you go, here's whatever done because you got a good heart or whatever. And I'm not knocking how it's happened. Hatsumi Sensei could do anything he wants. He was Soke. But if somebody hands you something, kind of like when you were handed a purple belt, that should speak volumes, because where you are proficiency wise. You're tripping over the sixth toe on your third foot or whatever every time you do whatever it is you're doing. But they hand you that. The only people I've ever seen that didn't question it, not that there isn't a high percentage of folks like this. It's very easy to see, and very quickly, who's in it for the rewards. And I don't mean proficiency and that kind of confidence and whatnot that comes out of that. I mean, look at the new color I have. But I'm gonna outline some skill sets, okay? And you tell me whether or not you've learned them and when. Okay, ready? Okay. So the Sanshi no Kata, those 5 models, okay, at a basic proficiency. Got it? Okay. The Kyonapo, okay, those 8 at a basic proficiency. Okay. 4 basic Kamai. Actually, I think it was 3, but because she ends a foregone conclusion, it's just your neutral, right? So Ichimon's no Kamai, Jimon's no Kamai, Hiro no Kamai, Hishi no Kamai, that kind of thing, right? Basic ski, right? Straight punch, right? Sokuyaku ken, so front stomp kick.
Sokuyaku ken.
Yeah, no, don't be adding things to this list.
Okay.
So you have what I have so far, right?
Yeah.
And there might be a skill or 2 in addition to that, but most of that stuff I just gave you, with the exception of 1 or 2, like Hicho no Kata, is out in mod 5, right? Most of that stuff is, within mod 1, mod 2, right? Okay. That was the requirements coming out of Japan in the early days to earn your Shodan. Okay. So it was just understood that if you lived in Japan and you trained consistently 1 or 2 times a week, you would have your Shodan in about 6 months, and you would have a new Dan level about every 6 months. Okay. People get a new Dan level every time they go to Japan. So, it is what it is, right? But we needed to focus on this whole self-protection idea. And so, where are you really, right? And then also, back in those days, the highest rank in the Bujinkan was 5th Dan. Okay, it was Godan, and at that level, you attained your Shidoshi license, and at that point, you could start your own organization and create your own curriculum, because the role or job of a Shidoshi, now that may have changed as we added 5 more ranks to Judan, and then we added 5 more ranks based on the Godai kind of things. I know people say 11th through 15th, but it was it always started out as. What's really funny is that the Japanese instructors will modify how they describe things based on the predominant belief system of the Western students. There's a reason we don't let 5-year-olds drive cars or build houses, right? And that's the same problem with Occidentals going to an Asian country and making certain assumptions about the way things are, because they have surface level understanding, but they have no cultural indoctrination. Do you know what I mean? So that's why, even Hatsumi Sensei and all these guys would eventually just start saying 11th Dan, 12th Dan, 3rd. In Japanese martial arts, there is nothing above 10th Dan, because 10 is the return to 0. It's supposed to be a level of pure potential. And then when Hatsumi Sensei put in the Godai ranks after it, they were supposed to be a focus area. You were returning to 0, but then you focused on each one of these elements again. And so Judan Chi Menkyo was supposed to be a 10th Dan who now went beyond the basic understanding and even intermediate understanding, and was very proficient in this idea of this earth thing, right? So physical strength, spiritual resolve, that kind of thing, right? Mental fortitude, confidence, those kind of things. They exuded this thing, right? Judan Simenkyo, right? Now we're in water, right? What most people call 12th Dan was again, right? We got the earth thing on. So we're doing this ascension thing again, right? And so by the time we hit Judan Kumenkyo, right? The void thing, now you're working on assimilating these things back in, right? It was very, very different, right? So, but without understanding why the teachers do what they do as an expedient, let's get the bullshit out of the way, right? And if the students aren't getting this little thing over here, that's trivial compared to the skill sets. Okay, so we'll do this, but then we end up in a situation after 1 or 2 generations, right? Teacher student kind of thing. Where is it? Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Which came first, right? Calling it 11th Dan, 12th Dan, or this other thing, right? And then everybody just kind of falls into it. So anyway, what I just laid out, Sanshin, Kyonapo, Ski, Basic Kamai, those kind of things. Yeah, that's what you needed for Shodan. Okay, so people would look at, and this was as far back as when I was working with Sensei Hayes, right? People would look at the curriculum and go, what the hell, man? It's not the way they do it in Japan, right? And for those who really wanted the rank, they would just come doing all that. I'll just go to Japan, right? So they already had it worked out, right? Because it was the fastest way to mastery, or at least the signs and designators that most people would look at, where you could back up, the authority and credibility, and then toss in Sensei says kind of things on a regular basis. Right? How many times do I roll my eyes in class when I go, I hate doing this. However, Hatsumi Sensei has said over and over and over again this thing, but it doesn't matter if he said it, or and you can regurgitate it. Do you understand it? Right. So anyway, when did you actually? Do you remember when you actually started at Warrior Concepts?
Yeah, it was 2.5 years ago, almost to the day. It was the beginning of March.
Oh, okay.
in
Awesome.
whatever year that would have been.
Yeah, and you're in a holding pattern at the moment because somebody doesn't think he's ready to test for black belt, which is fine with me. Right? You can hold it off as long as you want, because
Well,
I'm not.
actually, as you were talking about, going up through the Godai and at a lower level, that's much what's happening for me now. I get to go back and revisit and see the principles that I didn't notice the first time through or didn't understand. Not that I understand them fully now, but it is a notch better. And trying to kind of reintegrate on that higher level, it's a very useful time for me.
Yeah, I'm trying to get back to the. Well, not trying to. My curriculum is designed around this multiple phase kind of thing, right? Not. I mean, you have the ranking, right? But you can line things up any way you want because and I think I was getting to this before I went too deep into the ranking system that came out of Japan was that once you hit fifth dan, right, the Shidoshi's job was to get people up to being able to take that fifth dan test, but their primary responsibility was to teach the fundamentals in a way that the person could begin understanding what Hatsumi Sensei was conveying because he was at such a high level, right? So for him to come down and be teaching Kihon, even though he uses those terms, a Kihon at his level, a Kihon at a Dai-Shihan's level, not the same as a Kihon for somebody walking in the door. Same thing with the Kihon no Kihon, the fundamental, any given fundamental of any given fundamental, right? An example of that would be the proactive use of the knees to initiate the movement even before a step is taken into kamae, right? So, but at what point, right? So for the beginner, given these steps and whatnot, and then how much it's just like you with being a musician. We've had this conversation before. Um, uh, how long have you been doing it? Right. So there's a proficiency level for that, but there's also an understanding level. Right. And then we moved down the line and we moved on to new toys, new techniques, new skills, new glittery things. That's why it's important to put, like Mod 5 in, right? You've got some things in there that are new, but they're more like combining things. But that gives you an opportunity to kind of bone up on some things. And then for the students actually paying attention, they look back at the techniques, let's say from mod 1, mod 2, something like that. They look back and they go, shit, right? Not only did I let those get rusty, but now not everybody does that because my Shinobi Kai people don't have a chance to do that. But you suddenly realize, holy crap, I shouldn't be doing that the same way because we only were given what, 3 primary principles at this level. And then techniques were chosen based on the way a student comes in the door, coordination wise, understanding wise, whatever, right? Tactical, strategic thinking. And then you move up here. And if you're getting 2 or 3 primary principles out of the handful that we have for mastery at each level, well, then the technique should be upgrading. And this happened to me a lot, right? I look back and I go, okay, well, this is how the technique is done, right? Well, there's a difference between, and you know this because you're now starting to teach. So there's a difference between the way you teach a Mod 1 technique to Mod 1 people because we have a standardized form to get people to understand it and how you would be doing that same Mod 1 technique because your flow is better, your timing is better, your distance angling, all that. You understand what makes a henka a variation and the difference between being forced to do something different. It's not a henka, right? That last part got messed up. So now we're doing this thing that's actually happening, right? You understand that difference, the difference. And the idea of a true henka where there's a substitution of one thing or the other to keep things going the way they're supposed to be going, right? So either way is okay, but how they're done is really a sign of skill proficiency. right? So anyway, there were all these things, right? And then again, when things got moved to 10th Dan and all these things, everything kind of, got spaced out. But I'm trying to do things where there's phases. So you're actually going to go through those, not 5 modules, you're going to go through 5 phases 3 times before you hit, again, all the stuff beyond 10th Dan, I call beyond mastery. It's all based on terminology from Mikyo. But if 10 is a return to 0, then what the hell? What's with these other things? Unless they're just subjective so that somebody's making money, but let's not talk about that. So, but if mod 1 through 5 gets us to Shodan, but the kanji for show is the kanji for beginner, not the kanji for first. Every kanji after that numerically is 2nd level, 3rd level, 4th level, but the kanji for Shodan, that show is beginner. Interesting, right? It literally means like head of class, but it doesn't mean like it means in the West. The head of the class is the guy that's like, 4.0 average, all that kind of stuff. It's not that. It's no, the new guy in class is going to sit up as close to the teacher as possible so you don't miss a lesson. The people that know more and more, it's like the old schoolhouse thing where everybody, regardless of grade, went to the same little dinky room and whatnot. The higher grades were in the back because they only needed little, helps, right? The new students right up front where the teacher is. But anyway, so there's always these little things, but we take a lot of shite from people that, that's not the way it's done. And well, if you think it's always been done the same way. But anyway, there's the kind of the different phases, right? So to Shodan, I call that whole thing laying your foundation, right? It's almost like getting your house in order, right? Dropping bad habits, picking up new ones, getting things in the muscle memory and all that. And then I'm not going to talk about the 3rd phase, but the 2nd phase, the way I sum that up is I have a peer who runs a group in Belgium, and his training t-shirt for his group is a white t-shirt with a big old Bujin kanji out of the Bujinkan, right? And it says, playtime is over, boys and girls. It's time to go to school, right? So you've learned how to read and write. Now we're going to assign you some reading assignments, and you're going to write a book report, and don't plagiarize anything. Kind of, so anyway, it's all good stuff. Let me jump to the next question because I want to get back to interviewing Mr. Dr. Grand Poobah Fred. So now this is kind of one of those weird questions because and maybe we'll have to reframe it a little bit, because normally what I ask a student is what drew you to or back to ninjutsu, but you kind of chose from the local options, I guess, right? So here's maybe a better question. What were you looking to get out of a program, or what were you looking to get out of martial training on a personal level, right? When you went looking, and you did say something about the first class or first couple of classes or whatever, where I or somebody said something or did something that you wanted to explore. But what were you looking to get out of the program, and what told you were in the right place, regardless of name, brand, blah, whatever, right?
Yeah,
What
name brand was no part of it. I think there's
Sure.
levels to it on a just a almost surface level. Just the notion of feeling safer if I had a cane and knew how to use it. Should I ever come to the point where I'm somewhat enfeebled, that was one piece. The other piece is a little harder to articulate. Another of the avenues that I've followed over the years has been, I don't know, just a spiritual quest, if you will. I've gone to many Zen retreats for many years. When I was on my almost a year traveling out west in the van, I missed something like 3 days that I didn't have a 30-minute sitting session at some point during the day, but otherwise I always did. And it got to the point where it was just as perfunctory as doing push-ups, and it was doing me no good at all. And so it was time just to switch the channel. And I didn't, and then after, I don't even know, 15 years, whatever, I reconnected with the group in Springwater, New York, an offshoot, or at least at one point was an offshoot of the Rochester Zen Center, and had some very useful 5 years, 7 years, whatever, going to retreats there a couple times a year. But then that too began to lose its edge for me somehow, and it was time to do something different. I think on some level I was hoping that this would be an alternate approach to seeking better insight into those mysteries, seeking, and so and well, actually, there's a book that I've been meaning to give you when I'm finished rereading it, called Biocentrism, where there's like a series of 3 books by a physician named Robert Lanza, who basically starts with the whole quantum physics things like particle entanglement, the notion that things are just in a improbability wave function until consciousness interacts with them. Only then do they spring.
That's right up my alley, right? Because I've read the Tao of physics and all that kind of stuff. But there's just a lot of people that just want to know where the hell to put their foot. You know what I mean? So,
yeah. But anyway, his point is that most people in the Western world, most people around the world, think of time and space as being there, and consciousness just sort of occurs somehow in the middle of all this. And he says, no, it's backwards. Consciousness is the fundamental thing, and the physical world is spun out of consciousness, which sounds suspiciously like some of the Buddhist things or Hindu things or whatever.
Yeah, all the way back.
Comes at it. He comes at it as
right? Absolutely.
He comes at it through the math.
Sure.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's all good stuff. And as a matter of fact, you can't get into the upper levels where Hatsumi Sensei was operating and all that without that. And you don't have to know how it works, right? I appreciate people that have done the science and explain it. But, I had an engineer one time explain to me how the rotary wing airplane works, right? Because one of the things that threw me off very early in my military career was finding out that the Army had more aircraft than the Air Force did. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Right? We don't have an airplane, we have very few airplanes, but helicopters are rotary wing aircraft, because all those blades are shaped just like a wing, right? So I've had engineers explain to me how that whole thing works, but there's still a sense of magic to it, because there's a sense of, awe and wonder and all that. So sometimes knowing the answers and being able to regurgitate all the crossing of the T's and the dotting of the I's doesn't do anything to help you get to that point. It's kind of like, holding onto a kata or the official way to do things, or always worrying about whether we're doing it the right way or not. Just gets in the way of, doing things. But at the same time, you got the other personalities that don't want to learn any of that. And so they just wing it, make it up, and, because they want to do the fast track kind of thing. So I'm going to take a question or a comment that popped in here, because I think this is really, really important. And while I've noticed the same thing, I haven't, it's not like I didn't experience it, but what I realized was that my messaging got away from things. And so what can happen is we can believe, or we can just believe that everything is the same way. Let me just do this, right? So Dave originally had said, when we were talking about belts, I always thought black belt should be the first belt and white belt should be the last. You begin all grimy and finish purified or cleansed, like polishing a sword or sculpting a statue. That's pretty cool. Actually, when I was with Shoshi Hayes, and I was a part of his Marisi Kai Instructors Guild, and we were refashioning not the curriculum so much as the belt ranking structure. Because when I first got involved, we wore a white belt if you were brand new. And then from 9th Q to 1st Q, right, the intermediate phases, we wore the same green belt. There were no tabs on it. There was no designation or whatever, because what was important was the knowledge and the skill proficiency. And then if you were in the advanced levels, you wore a black belt. But we had a lot of folks, they were dropping off because even Shrey Sensei said this to me one time, because I was considering almost an equivalent to a scouting merit badge system for motivation where students could really get better at kicking in the use of their legs, Sokoho no Budo, use of the legs, the martial use of the legs, by having them, qualify for certain things. But even he said, sometimes you need to give students what they want to keep them around long enough so they get what they need. Because if you just do the need thing and it doesn't address the want, I know that most of the folks that are on here are probably in that 0.1% of the population that can commit to anything long term. And I mean, like, just dive in and go through all kinds of shit and challenges, and you'll figure it out. Because if you have a challenge, it just irritates you and pisses you off, and you're going to figure it out, right? It's just, it's the nature of the beast, right? But most people aren't that way. And most people, and this is the same thing when you get somebody that walks in the door for the first time and watches a class, right? If we don't understand that in their head, they have a problem, a want or a need they're trying to solve, fulfill, or attain, then we don't understand that whatever our coined or canned approach is like throwing Jello at the wall and hoping that the damn thing sticks is the decoration we intended. Well, we're going to have a decoration, but it's going to look kind of whatever, right? And then a bunch of shit to clean up off the floor, right? So if we're communicating or we're talking about aspects of the training or the art or whatever that we think is cool or that we think is what differentiates us or whatever, but it doesn't hit as the solution that they're looking for or even touch on it, what we are saying to them without actually using the words is, this is not what you're looking for. Okay. It's the same thing with every class that we teach. One of the first lessons that my instructor candidates get is that every class we teach, our students are either one step closer to black belt or one step closer to the door. Okay. So one of the first things they learn is stop writing students not learning or becoming disengaged or whatever with just bad students, right? Often what it comes down to is we're just shit at communicating the value to certain subsets, or understanding very quickly what it is that they're looking for. And as long as it falls within our realm, right? I mean, if they're looking to be the next MMA champion, then I let them know that these are not the droids you're looking for, right? But if I know what it is that they're looking for, then all I do is focus on those things from the art. Are they going to learn the other stuff? Yeah. But the only thing that matters when they're assessing these people teach what I'm looking for is, what are you doing? How are you demonstrating things? So if it's confidence, then every lesson gets referred back to confidence. Or we don't have to go, Bobby, are you feeling more confident? And a lot of people think this is placating to people. But again, we're not talking to enlightened people. If we were, they would already know this shit and they'd be off doing their own thing, right? But often cool moves and doing ninja stuff or Bujinkan or all these other words that a lot of people can't freaking pronounce and aren't going to call you, or they're not going to call a school if all they see is a long string of Japanese. I learned that along the way, right? It's one of the reasons why the school name outward facing became English. One, it conveyed our uniqueness, but I found out along the way, just in side conversations with people, like, I always wanted to call you, man. It sounds really, really cool, but I was afraid you're going to kick my ass because I mispronounced the thing. Like I was going to feel embarrassed if I said it wrong, or there are all these little nuances, right? Ultimately comes down to psychology, whether you want to buy it or not. So, but back to Dave's thing with the ranking, when we split things out, what we did was we split the Q levels down the middle. So the first grouping of Q levels after white belt we retained the green, but from 5th Q to 1st Q, we went to a brown belt. And we went to brown belt because it was what most martial arts groups are used to seeing just before black. But then later on, and I retained this in my program, where we have modules, and the modules, they equate to Q levels, but the modules were designed so that the student could look at different approaches that are contained within our system. And so here are these things, but martial arts belt colors are often chosen arbitrarily. And I know that there are these stories, and that's exactly what they are. These theories about how the colors came about because of blood, sweat, and tears and whatever. But the reality is, at least one of those systems was invented by Jotaro Kano, right? The guy who formulated judo. Just as we're going to use these colors to be equivalent to grades, like school grades, right? Because school kids were sitting around on their asses being eggheads all day and their bodies were deteriorating. So here's this, right? But what we did was we shifted to a system where each of the modules was given a belt color, but it wasn't arbitrary. The color to that system, or to each module, is based on the color of the realm on the module or on the mandala. Okay. So if we're looking at long distance, defensive angling, we use the color blue. Okay. Now, I know people see different colors and whatnot. There are two primary color systems that come out of the East. Okay. So we've got this one in Mikyo, but there's actually a secondary one that's actually based on the rainbow, actually colors of the rainbow. And coincidentally, science came to find out that those colors match up exactly to speed and wavelength of those colors, right? So if we're on the red, which is Earth, very little movement, right? Much slower, drawn out waves and whatnot. The higher we go, the faster things get, the more compressed they get. Pretty cool shit, right? By people that didn't have electron microscopes to look at wave and vibrations and things like that. But in the Tibetan system, based on the Godai, right, where you see these stupa and whatnot, red represents earth, orange, water, yellow, fire, that kind of thing, right? It's the Roy G. Biv kind of thing, right? But on the mandala, earth is yellow, water's blue, fire's an orangish red, wind is either black or green. Well, how the hell is that possible? Okay. So, but we based it on these because the color of the belts in the modules represent the life skills, not the physical. There's a little bit of it with strategy and tactics, but most of it is life skills. Earth represents command and value and someone who is an inspiration, motivator, role model, leader, right? They're helping other people. They're the rock for that other people can trust, right? When all shit's going to hell in a handbasket, there's one guy in the room that if I'm going to get behind, it's that one, because they've got a plan and they had a plan when they walked in the room. I know that because I've been hanging around them for a while, and that's the person I'm going to, hang out with. So, but there are these colors that match up. But see, on the mandala, the colors aren't arbitrary either. It wasn't like somebody rolled a dice and went, well, this one's going to be blue. And this one over here, we're going to, well, not orange, not red, but let's kind of find it. It wasn't anything like that. Right. The mandala is very, very dynamic. And so actually the student's journey, if we were doing Mikyo proper, the student's journey in any endeavor actually begins in the water realm. The water realm represents knowledge and learning that which can be known. So I don't care if, Fred was learning the keyboard or what. There's certain things that you start learning and picking up, right? But the problem can be that we start to develop favorites, And so that starts to skew our perceptions of things because we're either always trying to make the round hole or the round peg fit in whatever shape hole there is. What's that old story that if you only have a hammer, every problem better be a nail kind of thing, right? So it swings around. I'm going to do this opposite, right? Just me looking out, it would go this way, but I have to do it for you. So it moves this way, right? We move around the mandala this way, okay? And it's actually a spiral. If you understand how the mandala works, there's actually a double helix working. It's a pretty freaking amazing thing. But anyway, so we move from this lower thing here, and it's not in the south because the orientation's different too. So we move from knowledge and learning things to developing a sense of equanimity, where all techniques have the same value, either shit or it's important and can be used, but there's something that's missing, right? So we keep moving up here, and what's missing is discernment, right? Assessing things, reading this person. There's all these extra things going on. So if all my techniques and skills have a neutral value, they could be a great answer, they could be an okay answer, or they could be the worst freaking thing I ever try in any given context. What's needed is the mind of discernment, which is what most people call enlightenment, right? So it's this discerning mind that allows me to do that. It's not just how good am I at the techniques, how good am I at the skills. This crosses all endeavors. So I get up here, and then after that, well, how do I know what I need? Okay. Well, that's over here in this wind realm where we have this skillful means and all encompassing action. Now I'm getting around to the white belt because all the colors, right? So we have blue, yellow, orangish red, green or black, and void, the ultimate level, is white. But what we ran up against was if we did that color sequence and put white just before black belt, nobody else in the freaking martial arts world would understand that because everybody knows that white doesn't come before black. It's the exact opposite. So, Dave, I get where you're coming from, and it makes perfect sense. But again, those colors, by the way, is a day. Blue is the color of the sky in the morning. Yellow is the sky when the sun is at 12 o'clock. Dusk is an orangish red color. Overnight, you either get a green hue or it's black, depending on moon or no moon. And ultimately, what you have is life. You have a day. So again, that's just scratching the surface, right? So anyway, I don't want to put you guys to sleep, so we'll just keep on moving here with Mr. Dude. I'm going to come back to somebody says, hi guys from Australia. All clubs are struggling. I get it. I lost 75% of my student body. We went virtual because it was easy. I already had virtual programs going on, right? And then what I found out was that there's a shit ton of students, excuse my language, who won't come to class even if they don't have to leave their own house. Right? So it just made it easy. They didn't have to not show up physically. They just weren't on, right? And that goes back to that thing with Planet Fitness that I was talking about earlier. Most of the people that are signed up into my long distance training programs, we have 2 Zoom classes per week that tie into the program that Fred is in, right? The thing is on every class, right? And we're recording the class and students are on, and there's maybe 3 people. On the rare occasion, there might be a 4th one, but most of those people are sitting on their ass, right? Every once in a while, somebody actually shows up with a freaking cigarette hanging out of their mouth or whatever, right? Which is show up in a freaking dojo that way. And I get it. They don't see a difference, right? Or they don't make the connection, right? Showing up in front of your teacher, there's this whole thing, right? Well, I wouldn't do that if I was going to the dojo. We are going to the dojo, right? Imagine the Zoom screen being a window and you're just looking through this window. Your teacher's right there, okay? But anyway, so, but very few are on. And the killer, at one point, I offered lifetime training. That was expensive. right? But they paid once and they could train. None of those people are training. None. Right? There might be two that are training every once in a while. I see them, but most of them, okay. So that's like a killer because there's nothing. They don't feel the. Fred, you said it earlier, right? I'm going to stick this out because I paid for it. I'm not going to go in until I get it.
Amen.
Right. So, but often once people get things, it just becomes easier to drift because there isn't that monthly reminder when the tuition's coming due and whatnot. But anyway, COVID aside, what I have learned and what I learned a long time ago was that if I don't know the psychology of the students who do best, and I assume that everybody wants to do this, I just need to browbeat them into doing it, or this is only for the elite, and there just aren't that many people who want to do it. That's bullshit, right? See, I run by the belief that everybody's thought about doing martial arts or self-defense at least once in their lifetime. The question is where are they in their head now, or what kind of problems are they dealing with, and how can we relate training to being able to handle that? Right. So, but that's me. All right, Fred, you're back on the hot seat. I'll stop talking. Do you realize we have not done a pun yet? Fred and I can do just one of us will start and the other one we just it's like a train that just keeps adding cars. Anyway, let's see.
So are you inviting punishment? Is that what you're saying?
See, he just can't help himself, man. He's such a punny man. Anyway, so
I thought I was invited. I'm sorry.
So we know where you got started, right? And what you were looking for. What's the biggest value you get out of training now? Okay. I have a couple of questions before that, right? Have you ever needed your martial arts or your self-defense stuff for self-defense ever? I think you shared a story. You were in Georgia and you used projection of intent, but I don't know if that was related to what we do, or you're just a bad mofo and you scared the other person all by yourself. So
it's funny. The last real fight I was in junior high school, but there's probably been 5 incidents maybe over the years where I encountered a bullying situation, and I'm just not going to put up with that. But
sure.
Most of the time, they ran away. When I stepped in between, the bully took a look and backed off, and that was the end of it. And the one time they didn't, it was in a bar, and I threw the guy out the door, and that was the end of it.
See, I always knew that I wanted you on my side in the dark alley. So what value do you get out of the training? I think in one of our recent conversations, it might have been by email, you mentioned one of the other students saying something along the lines of sometimes they feel like their dojo family, they're closer with the dojo family than they are
Yes.
with their blood family, right? I get that a lot from folks, and I appreciate your sentiment in creating something like that. But I think that speaks to like the goal and the vision, right? I mean, if you're operating the class, here's the technique. How is this relevant, right? Because I mean, Takamatsu Sensei, I got a couple of quotes from Hatsumi Sensei that he got from his teacher, and Takamatsu Sensei would say certain things like, nobody in the right mind would choose to be a warrior. I mean, you're up at the crack of dawn in chafing armor, right? In dew-soaked grass, practicing, while everybody else is spooning with their honeys and they're still asleep, right? But somebody's got to do it. And so therefore, I don't know that mindset sticks so well in modern social circles because we don't have the same kind of ever-present threat of civil war or some warlord somewhere, going to be attacking or whatever. But the other thing that he said was only those who truly have something to lose can ever understand what it means to be a warrior. Okay? And this has nothing to do with like being rich or whatever. It speaks to the heart part. Oh, I'm not wearing that our student T-shirt. It speaks to the heart part of a nin symbol, right? The life part, designing a life that's worth protecting. Because the gist of that statement, and you see, it's easy to see a warrior's heart, whether they actually ever use martial arts techniques or not. Because when everybody else is running away from shit, we tend to run toward it, or there's a problem happening and we insert ourselves into it to resolve this thing. Like you stepping in front of bullies and those kind of things, right? But it's not about it's not about the fighting thing about a warrior. It's only those who have something to lose have a reason to develop an assessment ability to determine whether or not this person, place, thing, situation, or whatever is worth risking my life over. Because I built a life that people are dependent on me, and they would, my 5-year-old grandson would rather me be around tucking him in at night or reading a story to him, because right now he lives with me, than whether I kick somebody's ass. Right? It doesn't make sense. But what you often find is that those who have nothing to lose, right? Bragging rights are something to get. I'm speaking to the choir here, but you get the idea, right? So, again, if we're looking for, or if we're talking about building warriors or whatever, there's certain litmus tests. There's certain things that have been passed down that should be passed on in more than just regurgitated cliches, I think. But that's just me. Anyway, so value, right? What keeps you around other than this competition with yourself and the frustration, like, because we can all relate to that.
Well, there's certainly plenty of that. One of just the interesting things I discovered. I thought that the 30 years ago martial arts was sort of over and done with and long ago, until I found myself just constantly chambering that hand, and people saying, "What's that hand doing down there?" So, geez, which actually gives hope, because once in there, it stays, But getting the right stuff in there is certainly a challenge. And physical things, I've got much more flexible with the stretching than I was 5 years ago. Never thought I'd be doing rolls and that stuff again at this point in life, and not to the point where the floor is my friend, but it's closer than it was when I started.
You know what? It doesn't have to be your friend. You just have to be able to navigate it long enough to not die right now.
Yeah. And then more subtle things too. Just one thing that surprises me a bit, although it shouldn't, is that at this age, there are still psychological issues that come up that have to be dealt with and navigated and basically sorted out. In psychotherapy, they talk about the onion. You peel the onion, but there's always another layer. And well, that's still true at this age. And there are, things along the way. They're particularly just the advancement and the revision of self-image that comes with advancement. You know, some things there, without getting too detailed about it, have been very interesting to watch happening. There are also moments in my past that I just had no explanation for. One of them was in college, late at night, going out for a late sub, like a little bit after midnight, crossing this wide stretch of concrete where 5 roads came together. And I got looking at something in the sky, and several of my friends went up ahead. And all of a sudden, I found myself leaping with all my might to my left. And my thinking brain said, "What the hell? What is going on here?"
Right.
And when my feet touched the ground, a speeding car's door handle brushed my sleeve as it went by at like 40 miles an hour or something. And my friends looked around and said, "That guy almost hit you." And I didn't want to deal with it. I said, "No, it wasn't. it wasn't like what it looked like because I just had nothing to say about it, didn't know what to make of it. Well, now I begin to have a little sense of what might have happened then.
Well, you think about the quarter of a second that we tend to live in the past, and if you'd have switched to left brain before you leapt, that car would have helped you leap.
But the left brain didn't know. That was the thing.
That's right. That's right.
You know, it wasn't that I was responding to anything I was hearing or seeing. There was something else involved. That's really fascinating.
Yeah, that's some cool stuff, right? I've always said that at least the way we do it, or at least the way it was passed to me, and I'm trying to pass it on. Yes, we've got mechanical things and whatever, because you've got the shuhari, levels, but this is more of a personal development thing. Yes, I know we're learning how to defend ourselves, but that's one aspect of our lives, right? When shit happens a certain way, there is no negotiating. You've already tried those things. This is all that's left. So that's a corner of my world, right? At best. It's just like with the Kuji, right? The first 3 levels are physical. After that, it gets more psycho-emotional. And then after that, it's more of what Western science would put into the categories of like ESP and those kind of things, right? The whole art is like that. It's not just the Kuji. The whole damn thing is like that. And so I've always said it's like personal development. And how cool would it be, right, if everything you learned in school was taught in the context of martial arts? I think people get the answer right a whole lot faster, right? What's 17 plus 27? What, pow! but with the personal development thing, think about all of the friggin' personal development books or videos or whatever that have ever been produced. And I think the latest statistic that I saw was that the average page read number of most people who buy personal development books, they don't get past page 19, which is freaking hilarious to me, because I start with the introduction and just keep on trucking, right? But you just pick one: time management, right? Students often realize, or maybe they don't realize, how much they're getting better at time management. Like, I need to move now, not I'm going to get around to getting ready, to move, to make a decision, to what, and you just get better at it because the consequences of failure suck. So anyway, okay, so that's value at the moment. Anything else that you want to add on top of that? Like, do you consciously use this any part of the stuff that you've picked up in Ninjutsu in other areas of your life that you know of? I mean, you've been around for a while, and you've also been around psychology, so you've got lots of tools. But right, is there anything that you can think of that?
One thing that comes up a lot, especially in this most recent phase, is just paying better attention to the bodily sensations in terms of where I'm at. I'm, adjusting certain things like just tightening the core better, and in terms of being able to do some of the moves better, and being more aware of, is my position exactly where it needs to be, or just some approximation like it was when I went through this the first time, that kind of thing. And that pops into awareness just at different times through the day, whereas that never used to. The other thing that's really interesting, I mentioned that musical organization. Well, whenever you're, have a committee, some people come on with attitudes, and how do you handle those attitudes, and what do you do, et cetera, in certain situations. And I found that in dealing with one of them, as I thought about it, I was like, well, that was a wind technique that I used. There was a big challenge, but they misunderstood totally what I was trying to do. And so it was like, well, hey, I'm not controlling here. If you want to do this, take it over. It's yours.
You choose. That's right.
And
mindset.
Suddenly there was nobody there.
Yeah.
So, and thinking back in terms of the psychiatric career and how to deal with situations, there's a lot of parallels between the physical world and the techniques and principles and the things that came into play there. It's just I did not articulate them to myself in that way back then.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Had a couple of things pop up here. Let's see. Don Drager said something like all rank is a modern thing and basically rubbish. All arts have good, not good practitioners. People need to forget about rank and ego. Yeah, no, I get that. Right. I'm going to play devil's advocate and say that there's a positive and negative to everything. It depends on how we're using it, right? So I think that the ranking thing, because the ranking system, this Q and Don framework actually comes out of Buddhism. It's the way monks, it's a system that monks, they used to grade monks as they were learning things and moving up through the ranks. Okay. A lot of these things were borrowed, right? Your dogi, same thing, right? They were worn a certain way. Temples were the only places that had enough space during inclement weather back in the day. And so you dressed a certain way, carried yourself a certain way, right? Training was often very, very rough. The cool thing about that Buddhist attire is that there's a way to tie it. And I try to fight back ego's recognition of history and whatnot, and just go, it's kind of like when I'm dealing with my 5-year-old. He's 5. He doesn't know any better. But there's a certain way that you cross the jacket over because you're training and it's life and all that. But if you died during training, dressing you for your funeral was really easy. You just undo it and tie it the other way. And now you're all set, right? Because monks wear things a certain way because there's this idea of you're not dead physically, but you're in the world, but you're not of the world. So it's a kind of death, right? Where you're not associating the same way, not eating the same shit everybody else is. Same thing, right? But it's a format so that people know where they are, as long as there's a consistent standard being applied, right? And you're right. Once somebody starts leaning over to all their focus is on getting the next belt, that becomes problematic. But not having any grounding in what anything means or where you happen to be in the whole thing. Even in spirituality circles, right? When you meditate, one of the Asian ways of saying this is that you enter the void, and when you come back, you bring some of that void with you. But void in this case is potential, right? It's a letting go and an opening. There's also really bad translations, like the goal is to kill ego. Well, I hope not, right? It's to bring ego under control. But ego itself is a function of what in Asia, and Fred can give you the Western terminology for this, but it's called the Manasvijnana, which is the discerning system, right? Me here, that there, that's different than that thing over there, right? Those kind of things. So we can't kill that function. If you kill that function, you'll just be wandering around freaking drooling and not have any connection to anything. You're useless even to yourself, right? So there's like really bad translation. So there's a middle ground between not getting caught up in it, but at the same time being able to use it so that I tell students all the time in the dojo, that belt's more for us as instructors than it is for you. And I get it. Ego sees the thing. You obviously have attained something, right? But especially in the program that Fred is in, and a lot of my guys are in, you go from, okay, yeah, I got the belt, to a class or two later going, shit, how much do I, not know or whatever, because we keep bumping things up. But if I use the belt as a standard by which when I walk over to Fred to make a correction, I know what he should know by this point, not by assumption, but by a set of standards, what he should know and to the level he should know it and what's coming next. Now I don't just tell him that was a mistake and here's how to do it right. the adjustment is, okay, look, that was okay back here because we weren't looking at that. And that was good enough. Now, what we're looking at is the guy on the street throwing a 1-2 or a 1-2-3 combination. And you don't have time for that extra little move or your foot to be a little too far where you have to move your torso first to move the next foot. Okay. To get to this point here, efficiency of movement without sloppy movement. Because often what will happen is feet are supposed to be a certain distance apart based on the person's build, not based on a measuring stick. But it's supposed to be a certain distance apart because of how far things should be. But if somebody doesn't understand what they need and they're just going to go to moving more easily, what they'll do, what the body will do and the brain will do is just move the feet closer together because movement's easier, right? Like when we're doing, you're Fred's in Mod 5. No, one of these days, I actually toyed with the idea of pulling a Bujinkan on you and just promoting you to Shodan while we were on. But I wouldn't do that to you because both of us would feel like shit. So anyway,
I'm really loving this time for extra study. Thank you for not depriving me of that.
Yeah, no worries. So one of the things, people don't even have to get to Mod 5 where we have Hicho, right? Literally before Black Belt. Yeah, but that's one of the key on a boat. Look, stop talking to me. Anyways, but I teach Hicho way earlier down the line. It's just not a standard for promotion. Because until somebody can move on 2 legs or on 2 feet, making them move on 1, and I mean like leaping from point to point, Fred knows, right? But one of the first things we do when somebody has ichimonji down, or at least they think they do, is then we introduce them to this idea of Hicho, where the litmus test for a correct ichimonji is your ability to go to Hicho in 1 move without moving your torso first. And if you can't, well, then your leg gets broken. Right. So because we use shinai or whatever to attack your leg all the way up to full speed. But what people will do, and Fred's seen this in class, what people will do because they get scared is they'll sneak that lead leg back closer to the rear leg so it's easy to pick it up. The problem now is that if the incoming weapon overshoots that space, your ground leg gets tagged. Right. So you saved the one he was going after, but you lost one anyway. Right. So there are these litmus tests that should be built into proficiency if we really understand the nature of warfare. Because it's one thing to regurgitate something the teacher said, and it's a whole other thing to understand what it's like to be inside that bubble and to understand if that 11-foot frickin' spear is thrown at me. Right. And he's moving forward and we're not doing static practice and right. There's all this stuff. So anyway, I do have at least one other one here for you. I know we went over these things earlier, but
can I comment quickly on
course.
the belt question?
Of course.
That's very central to my experience of these last 2.5 years. I had a deja vu moment when you were talking about the thinking mind. Tony Packer, the teacher at the Springwater Center, used to say the thinking mind is necessary to make out the grocery list. The problem is when people try to tackle more subtle issues than that. And there's another quote that I really like that took my fancy back in those days by a lady named Byron Katie saying, "I love my thoughts, I just don't believe them completely."
There you go. Yeah.
So the belts for me were really helpful because they brought up all manner of thoughts for me to examine and their relevance to my self-image and just, to me, a real key is just holding the thinking more loosely, not letting it, it makes a great servant and a terrible master, I've heard it said.
Well, the word mandala itself just means boundary, right? So if we were going to work on everything, not that we can, right? Things get too vague. You start to lose connections and whatnot. So it's easier to kind of fence yourself in a little bit. That way I can look at this part of the map. I can go look at anybody that's been in the military, right? Those grid squares, they come in handy, right? Because otherwise you just have shit all over the place, right? I mean, it's one thing, I can see this little curve in the road and whatnot, but how do I tell somebody how to get exactly there? How to drop something that is going to take out the bad guy exactly there? Well, we've got these invisible lines that help us associate, right? So any given level, if we're using the structure I believe correctly, of course I'm biased because I buy into the using it. Um, it keeps you, like you mentioned the belt levels, but every module has 3 belt levels because there's somebody new to that module and those new principles and concepts and new skills, and there's somebody in the intermediate level. So we have a microcosm macrocosm thing going on the whole time. Ultimately, as a student, beginner, intermediate, advanced, but in every module there's a beginner, intermediate, advanced with those lessons. But it's like having a box where this is where I'm going to look, and then occasionally you look outside the box at the other one that you just came from so that you can understand the connections. And hopefully at some point people can start to see them more like jigsaw puzzle pieces, where any given system feeds another one and any given system is dependent on input from, because it's life, right? It's just the way things work. And so it's again, it depends on how you relate to it and understand it, because otherwise it's just a how's the ego do it? I like it, so therefore it's good and I'm going to use it, or I don't like it and therefore it's shit and I'm going to excuse it away 4 waves from Sunday, right? So yeah, cool stuff. Even in the Transcendented Heart Sutra, right? The in Japanese, the Hanya Shinkyo, there's this idea of the form and the formless, right? And it's to somebody who doesn't understand the reference points, it really just, it sounds like a bunch of double talk. But we always say that the form is what the formless looks like. What the hell does that mean? Well, our ears and eyes and tactile sense and all that can only pick up certain frequencies, certain degrees of touch, whatever. And the cool thing is the more we become body aware, the more the tactile sense gets, like, we recognize pressure that we never noticed before. Holy shit, except that you were being, whatever, right? So, but all the way down to, and we learned it in school, right? The atoms and the molecules. And it's easy to see how people wouldn't believe in that. Well, because I can't see it. So therefore, well, I know, but you can't see into spectrums that the dog can see in either. Does that make him better than you? Or he's just seeing a different version of the world? Or, well, yeah, but the chair is what those atoms and molecules look like in a given combination, right? Just like the umbrella or the person or the liver in that person. And so it, without the form, we couldn't navigate, right? We'd be lost. But if you get so totally caught up in it's just all this and you don't need this thing over here, then where the hell are your anchor points? Can you imagine, right? Can you imagine me inviting you to be on here so I can interview you and not use 8 p.m. on Monday, September 2nd as a freaking reference point? And we're both living in the Eastern time zone, so we didn't have to do a time zone conversion. Holy shit. Dude, I've been waiting for you for this long, whatever, right? So yeah, cool stuff, right? And the truth is in there somewhere, right? It's the experience, and I think that's what Hatsumi Sensei has always been trying to convey. After you, but he always teaches a certain way because he's teaching up here. He's depending on Dai-Shihan, Shihan, Shidoshi, whatever, to get people up to that level by explaining things and by being able to translate it so that they can get to that point. I can't speak to whether or not it's being done other than comments that they're now Soke have said over the years. Because what it looks like is people come to Japan and, like, I fill up notebooks and then I go back and I work on that stuff on my own or with the black belts, because they're the only ones who can really give me what I need as far as attacks and whatnot. And their ukemi is right and those kind of things. But I don't practice in your classes. That's student time. So I need to work this stuff out. But what's kind of been explained to me, or the way it looks to them, is that people come to Japan, learn this new stuff, and then go back and immediately start teaching it to students who weren't even ready for the 3 levels below that one. So I don't know. Being a teacher it's not a badge of honor. It's a freaking pain in the ass some days, because you give the wrong stuff to the wrong student and they either abuse it. That makes sense. But we give the wrong stuff to the wrong student at the wrong time. We confuse the shit out of them. You do that too long, they go away. Most teachers go, well, they weren't as committed as I was. No, maybe they were just confused, right? And or they got stuck in that that teenager or preteen. I don't know if there's an actual age to this. Fred, you would know in the psychiatry world, where a person, whether they're being intentionally gaslighted or not, they just keep bumping into, you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong, until finally they just go, fuck it. There's no way I'm going to get this. And then they just go off and do something else. Right. Or worse. Right. But that can be problematic, right? Where if they're not, if things aren't being acknowledged, one of the things we do in the instructor training program comes from neurolinguistic programming. We just abbreviate it as PCP, but some of us guys that are old know what PCP meant in a different time, right? But it means praise, correct, praise. And it comes from the idea and the understanding that when we're being rewarded with something, man, our brain's wide open. Our mind is like, yeah, tell me more, right? But when we're being corrected and our belief system or whatever is being challenged, defensive walls can go up. So it's this cool little formula where before I make a correction, I tell them about something they're actually doing right. Now, not necessarily in Shinobi Kai class, right? Because I'll go, what the hell was that? You should know better, right? Or you guys are killing me. But for the average student, right? It could be a footwork problem, but I'll go, you know what? I like the way the time that you're moving, you're like dead on. Okay. But what we need to fix is this thing here with the foot, because it's going to slow down the next movement. Okay. So try this. Okay. I'll show it again. Try this. Okay. Even if they're still making the same mistake, what I'll say is, okay, we're going to keep working on it. Right. Awesome. Okay. So, and I know to a lot of folks, it's placating, but if you do it right, just like when other people did it to us, intentionally or not, we don't know it's happening when it's happening, right? But the point of the formula, and this is just psychological taijutsu, the point of the formula is to circumvent their defensive wall going up so they accept the criticism and they don't get in their own way, right? One of the jobs of a teacher is to expedite the student's development so they can get from point A to point Z or Z, wherever you're from, right? Quicker than the teacher did, right? Anyway, so let's see. Fred. Let me ask you. This is, I think this is where we'll round out, and we'll take some questions or comments, or because I'd like to hear your perspective on some of the folks, their comments as well, because you've been around for a while. One, has it always been easy to make it to class? I think we talked about that a little bit earlier in the day, right? And how much luckier are you than everybody else that's allowed you to, make it to being on the cusp of earning your black belt?
Very lucky. I live 5 minutes from the dojo. How lucky is that?
And that makes it easier, right?
My gosh, yes. But that's not to say it's easy all the time, because there's times when it's like, oh man, I don't feel like doing it today. But that's true of anything worth doing. There are times you have to suck it up, And then there are times when,
and there's other times you actually disappoint yourself, because we just had this conversation. There's other times that there's a level of disappointment because your body's telling you, I need to rest.
And there's
but I want to go to class.
There's times when I should have listened to that and didn't. And so, it's not black and white. There's shades of gray in there.
Of course. So if there was something that you could share as far as I don't know, what comes to mind if you had anybody coming in the dojo that let's say I'm going to borrow you, for example, right? That was concerned about age, injury, too much shit going on in my life. I don't know if I can make it fit in. Any of those things, right, that you've dealt with. What would you tell them? Other than you're going to do you.
Yeah.
And
Well,
throw a pun at them.
no, and I tell them they need to do them, but at
Right.
the same time, you know, those things are navigatable. Um, you know, there's lots of times I leave class feeling better than I went in because we laugh a heck of a lot, you know. And if they have the sense of humor to embrace that, if they don't, they won't stay anyway. And if they do, it can really be sustaining. I
Well, and
might
that
say
laughter is
something
really
like that.
important too, because especially if your focus, as ours is on, like, this is not lip service. It's about not dying, right? I mean, we could spend all of our time on that, or we could just spend all of our time focusing on, correct body movement and things like that. But one of the things I learned very, very early on, and it was from Hazumi Sensei, he said, if you're studying real Budo, if you're studying this from the perspective of life and death, then there's all the more reason, right? I mean, he's done it sometimes, and I think he did a little bit more as he got closer to retirement. Things pissed him off more, or he wasn't willing to let them go and just let people do as they wanted. But he would make jokes. He would do all these things. He didn't act like most of the grandmasters I've ever run into, or even heads of schools that were had to do the whole chest out kind of thing. And the more you focus on this, the more important it is to be lighthearted in class. But again, there's another one of those dichotomies, right? Too much on one side, and you're going to lean into the tough guy, hit hard, whatever. Lean too much into the other side, and then you forget why you're training. I mean, yes, you're developing skills, but are you developing the mindset and the connection between the psycho-emotional, the endocrine system and whatnot, and what's in muscle memory? Because people can they can get very, very proficient doing either one. But when the adrenals kick in, right, it's easy to be proficient in the dojo. Yeah, it's a fairly safe place, right? So anyway, you just started on your journey being an instructor. You liking it? Not liking it?
All too often, I don't know that I have the skill level to really demonstrate like I would like to.
Yeah, but I'm not having you teach black belts. Oh, wait. I got it. Wait, sorry. I missed a word combination there. Goes back to the perfectionist that you and I both have buried inside of us.
Well,
I don't know enough to teach the way I would like to. Gotcha.
and I have also been called upon to
Which is why it's
cover
my job to
classes
make you do it anyway.
to cover classes that black belts came to. But of course, before that, I had the proviso that if anybody who outranked me showed up, they're teaching, and I'm not, or at least they have the invitation to step in anytime they see something that I'm doing that they could show better. So that has not really been an issue because the black belts who have shown
There's
up
a
have
couple
been
of
very
black
good.
belts that will still not step in because you were given the lead for this class. So, well, I know Sensei McLaurin does that occasionally. He'll take a group of like newer students over and let you do
Sure.
the other one and stuff. So, but I think that's important, especially when you're doing the senpai kohai kind of thing. That senpai, it doesn't matter if the person way outranks you. And this is our thing too. If I assigned you to teach a class, I don't care if Shidoshi shows up. He can help you if there's a glitch or there's something weird going on, but their job in that situation is to help you be a good teacher, not to take that opportunity away from you.
Yes.
Right. And again, this goes back to well, I'm a Shidoshi, or I'm this color belt, or I'm this Dan level, and that's above yours. So I'm, taking over the class. Not in my dojo, right? Because everything is a learning opportunity. Okay. And I understand the senpai kohai kind of thing and who's responsible for what, right? But if the kanshi or the kancho or the hyoshi or kyoshi, there's all kinds of friggin' words, right? There should be a meaning to that. It's for decades, Hatsumi Sensei has been just kind of pointing people out at whatever rank level and having them come out and demonstrate something. Okay, he's not always just assessing. He's said more often than not, right? If you're really developing and you really understand what this art's about and what you're looking at, then you should be able to look at any given technique that somebody's demonstrating and rough around the edges aside, know whether that's a good technique or that's going to get you killed, regardless of the rank level of the person demonstrating. Right? But people often dismiss things because the person that was called out to demonstrate has a green belt or a white belt, or they're one of Hatsumi Sensei's chosen children or whatever. Okay, so he teaches on a lot of levels. So now I get it. Okay. Okay, so let's jump on a couple of these things because I'm going to have you do a little bit of feedback here as well, and then we'll wrap this up. So let's see. Dun, 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 dun. I think whole rank thing in Bujinkan is an old thinking from what Hatsumi Sensei was learning, and he was told he would never be a warrior, martial artist, but he would be a human being by Takamatsu. You know that story? He was actually it came from one of the earliest, if not the first meeting with Takamatsu Sensei. Hatsumi Sensei was quite the braggart, right? I mean, he had a lot of Menkyo Kaiden, full transmission of a bunch of these lineages and whatnot, had been training since he was like 5. I think the first thing he was handling was a boken, something like that, right? And so he, and Takamatsu Sensei, I think the first meeting, what he said was, yeah, but can you survive? Survive what? Whatever, right? But it kept happening for a while. And at one point, Hatsumi Sensei told me at one point, Takamatsu Sensei said, what do you want to be? I want to be a great martial arts master. Well, you're never going to be a great martial arts master. The best you're ever going to be is a gadfly. We all know what a gadfly is, right? Those big, heavy, thick, armored freaking flies that fly around a horse's or a cow's ass eating shit. Right? And boy, did that rubbed him the wrong way. And he had to think about it, right? But if I really want to be training with this guy who everybody pointed me in that direction, then if that's the best I'm going to be, then you know what? I'm going to be the best that thing. And, but that's part of getting yourself out of your own way. So, again, you've got all this experience, psychiatry and psychology, all that kind of stuff, right? What would you just say to somebody that, has a hard time getting out of their own way in one way or the other, whether it's about starting training, doing training, sticking to training, whatever, because sometimes you got to kill off that little piece, right? And go. But if you were talking to a new student that, was constantly getting frustrated because they weren't doing it right, or they expected that they should be able to do better or whatever, what would you tell them?
I have no idea. I'd have to see what the moment whispered in my head to do.
Oh, look at you being all spiritual again.
No, but that's the truth. One size doesn't fit all.
Absolutely. And again, that goes back to when somebody comes into my dojo. Do I have a scripted process for people who help me onboard new students? Yes. But there's plenty of space in there, especially when we ask the student, what is it that you want to get out of this training? What are you looking for? What are you looking to get out of this program or any kind of martial arts program? Okay. And then I dismiss the first 2 things they tell me. Not out loud, because but people tend to come in already preloaded with the obvious. or the thing they want to say that should impress the teacher to take them as a student. I want to get down to the emotive level, right? Where the life problems really are, because when this becomes a solution for something you absolutely can have to solve, you'll do this no matter how challenging shit gets, because it has to be solved. So when I'll say, what do you want to get out of this? And they'll tell me, and I'll go, okay, we can work on that. Okay. And something else. And they'll tell me that. And the space between the words might start stretching out, might not. But usually by number 3, they're at a loss for words, but you can see the eyes shifting because they're trying to look for things. And I might rephrase it a different way. If we could fix one thing, or if you could get a handle on one thing in the next 3 to 6 months, that will allow you to produce results faster, handle problems better, whatever it is, what would that be? And not only do they get around to saying it, but you know what this is like. When they say it, the voice is different. The intonation is different. You can hear there's an emotional edge to that. And that's when I say we can work on that. Okay. Because when somebody has that, everything's different, right? It's not just a passing hobby, yeah, or a passing fad or whatever. And then Samuel said, I think law enforcement / prison officers, the only ones that routinely come into physical contact with people, but I think command presence helps the civilians display a sense of don't mess with me, and it works for good and evil people. Yeah, it's just a level of confidence. Yeah. I just did a beginner's defensive combat handgun 1-day seminar a couple of weeks back, and one of the guys that showed up was actually the husband / dad. I got a mom and a son team that signed up together, and so husband / dad signed up for this, and I didn't see that coming at all. But once I always open things pretty much the same way, and what I said was, why are you here? What are you looking to get out of this? It was a seminar. I still pick people. Kind of like one of my things at the end of every class is, what'd you learn? Right? So, but what came out was he had just applied for a law enforcement position. Now it's called DCNR here, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources here in Pennsylvania. But ranger, right? And when we say park ranger, we don't just mean like, a picnic park or whatever. We've got a lot of space, and there's been a rash of people doing dumb shit, shooting at park rangers and whatever. So, and so, these guys have got to do things. So I do find that my folks that live it every day, whether they're local or they're my long distance program or whatever, tend to take things much more seriously because they live and die by this stuff on a regular basis. And then closely behind them are, they could be married, not whatever, family, but I call them like the dad, grandpa kind of thing. There's an age range where they've seen enough about how human beings can lash out at other human beings, and they don't want to not be able to do something should something come at them or one of their loved ones. And now they have a reason to it, and it's not about belts. So the belts serve a purpose, because all these guys are like, I don't need belts. Right? I'm not worried about the belts. It's just about this thing. The belt's not for you. Okay. So I understand that that's even better that you don't need the belts. However, you and I both need to know where you are in the program at any given point. Otherwise, you get lost, and it just becomes, well, I just enjoy training. Okay, well, if you just enjoy training for training's sake, then why use names? Why use brand names? Why use belts? Why use uniforms? Why use reference points? Why, right? And people do that all the time. But there's this one little thing that throws them off. Anyway, Fred, I really appreciate you being here. I'm kind of disappointed that James, I'm sure not more disappointed that James is, but anyway. So open forum to you at the moment.
I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah. So anything you have to kind of wrap things up? What do you wish I would have asked? What were you jonesing to talk about before we wrap this up? That's an old phrase.
It's
kind of like
that's all right though.
It's kind of like bogarting something.
That too. No, I didn't come in with anything. Any agenda of what I wanted to say. I, just basically play the cards I'm dealt was the approach. So
yeah. So just to summarize, 76, not trombones. That's an old phrase too. Can you play the trombone?
No, but once I was at a combined medical and music conference in Rochester, New York. The Eastman School of Music is huge and is there. And the girl that was with me, we stepped out for breakfast, and she happened to look around this one corner, came back, says, "You won't believe what I saw." And she took me there. There were, honest to God, 76 people playing trombones walking down the street.
Oh, shit.
It was an actual cool 76 trombone thing. I don't know who did it or why, but it was the most bizarre thing. Anyway.
Well, at least it was trombones and it wasn't some other, but never mind. Anyway, so, all right, cool beans. Well, I appreciate you being part of this. What I'm trying to do is kind of equalize it out between folks in the dojo, and I'm not rank specific. What I'm really looking to share for folks is, here's an age thing, here's an injury thing, here's a, but I'm really looking for the folks that are, highly engaged, because somehow they're making it work. I mean, Christy just took a different job, and she's got a 3-hour drive time just to get to and home from work. So, her 8-hour days turned into something very, very different. Right. And yet Tuesdays and Fridays almost universally. Every once in a while there's a glitch, but she somehow just makes the class, right? And does her thing, and it's cool stuff. So anyway, let's see. Dave Phillips says good conversation. Cool. Nothing like you guys being a fly on the wall, right? I don't see anything else. Normally it's James filtering this stuff out, so I had to be my own producer at the same time. So thanks for helping out, Fred. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks.
Thanks for not touching any buttons. Thanks for not touching any buttons that would have messed things up.
I know my limitations.
See, a man's got to know his limitations. That's right. All right, guys. I will talk to you again soon. Next week we'll do another normal, if we have normal topics and whatnot. And while I'm busy trying to figure out who the next one's going to be. So that being said, I will talk to everybody again next time on KUDEN. Get more of KUDEN Radio. Subscribe through your favorite podcasting site, or join our clan of serious modern warriors at onlineninjaacademy.com.